from food products and heavy equipment to cutting-edge technology, Georgia manufacturers, they are producing some of the most innovative products in the country. And now the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, it is launching the second year of its Coolest Thing Made in Georgia competition, a statewide contest designed to spotlight the products, companies, and workers who are powering Georgia's manufacturing economy. So joining us right now is Chris Clark, the president and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, to talk much more about this. Chris, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Zach.
So, one, it's great to have you here in studio. We do a lot of remote interviews, so we appreciate you being here in person. It's always a better conversation.
Yeah.
Coolest Thing Made in Georgia. Talk to us about that. What do people need to know?
So this is our second year, and we started last year as really two purposes. One is to expose Georgians to the stuff that we do make here, that we build, grow, create, innovate, film, all of those things. But the other one is to inspire that next generation of Georgia student to be a maker, doer, grower, builder. And so it was a great program last year, and overwhelmingly our companies around the state said, let's go again.
It really puts a spotlight on what is happening here in Georgia. From your position, leading the chamber, where is Georgia's economy right now?
Georgia's economy is much more diverse than it has ever been before. A lot of credit to Governor Kemp and the companies we've been able to recruit over the last 6 to 8 years of record economic development numbers. What we're seeing, though, is that growth is in every single corner of Georgia. And so 80% of all the economic announcements that we've had in the last 5 years have been outside of metro Atlanta. And so you're seeing little pockets in Bainbridge and in South Georgia and on the coast, like with Hyundai and all their suppliers. You're seeing incredible growth, but you're seeing it in logistics, in technology, in the EV space, and the hybrid automotive, and aerospace, literally in almost every single economic sector that you can imagine.
And as the head of the Georgia Chamber, you sort of sit atop a really interesting pyramid of, as you point to, a very diversified economy here in Georgia. We're a big state, geographically a very differing state. You've got the core metro, very urban here. You've got a lot of rural Georgia, and then you've got a lot of suburban and exurban as well. Agriculture is our number one industry here in Georgia, but then you point to these factories, the manufacturing. There's been a real point of development in our state recently as well. How do you navigate that and make sure all these different industries are getting the attention that certainly they all want?
Well, we really use our local chamber network. What are those local issues that maybe small businesses care about? Are there healthcare issues that we need to know? Larger companies, infrastructure companies have different needs, but at the end of the day, they all kind of work together, right? So we can have the bankers working with the truckers today because they see the benefit of what that economy means statewide. And also, I think it's important that it's not just one Atlanta economy driving the state, that if you took Atlanta out of Georgia, that Savannah region would have a larger economy than Alabama, Louisiana, and Mississippi. I mean, it is an economic engine on its own. And then when you put that together with maybe agriculture in southwest Georgia, it really does have an incredible impact and give us a lot of opportunities.
You talk about that coastal area, the Savannah area. I think you know where I'm going with this. How big of a driver of economic development are the ports of Savannah and Brunswick?
Huge. Unfortunately, we saw a little bit of a hit last year because of the tariffs, but the numbers are there. I think one of the most important things is the Port of Savannah just announced this week that they're going to spend their own money to do the first studying of deepening the port again. They're going to add a new terminal down there, and I think we forget about the Brunswick port, which is now the number one roll-on, roll-off port in the country.
Talk about deepening of the port. That's something I think a lot of people might hear and think, well, what does that mean? That seems really awfully technical and probably involves a lot of dredging, complex matters. If the port is deepened, what would that mean for the flow of cargo moving through that port?
I don't know that you'd get necessarily a higher amount of cargo, but you want to get bigger ships, right? As soon as Panamax ships started going through, that's when we had to do the first deepening of the port 10 years ago, which was really a statewide effort because every county in Georgia has some economic impact coming in and out of those ports. And so this is going to be able to clean that up, but also to provide access to another berth that they're going to hopefully build in the next few years.
Let's talk about Coolest Thing Made in Georgia, the competition here. What are some of the cool things that are made in Georgia? Who won last year?
So Lockheed Martin won last year, and it was really cool. When we launched this, we said, gosh, if we can have 60 companies, 60 products, we had over 120. We said if we can have 100,000 voters, we had over 200,000 voters from all over the world. We had votes from as far away as India. We had over 13 million media impacts over the course of the competition. Lockheed's Super Herc won, which is a cool thing if you've ever seen one fly over, North Atlanta. We've had everything from that to Gulfstream airplanes to the runner-up last year was from Archer Aviation, which are these new electric flying taxis that operate like an Uber that they're building out in Covington here. We also had small business like Claxton Fruitcakes and Oyster Bamboo Fly Rods from Blue Ridge.
That's quite a range of products
It
there.
really
We're going
is.
from fruitcakes to Lockheed Martin.
Yes, but listen, all of them had votes. They had people that cared about them, and it made a difference. And, we've already got probably, 50 to 100 products that have already been nominated for this year's competition. And you're going to see some of those same small businesses compete with some of those big guys.
Let's talk about aerospace. Your mind immediately went to Lockheed and other aerospace companies. How big of a driver of aerospace development, economic development, and innovation are some of the military installations here in Georgia? We've got Dobbins here in the metro, of course,
Sure.
and then a big driver in central Georgia is Robins Air Force Base.
Right, and then you go down and you've got Moody down in Valdosta as well, and then obviously the Marine Corps base has a logistics component in Albany, but then there's also an Army airfield in Savannah and another one down the coast. And so, those military bases are here on purpose. We recruited those in the 1940s and the 1950s, and they have had an economic impact not just from the military activity that goes on there, but all of those surrounding supplier networks, whether they're making helicopters or making engine repairs. That's why we've been able to grow that aviation industry so well in this state.
And it is a knock-on effect for folks who live and work in the state as well. I mean, we're talking a little bit at the macro level about companies that are here, they're investing. We're talking about products that they make. But at the core of all of this, the reason you want development and investment is because it is a key impact in how Georgians live their lives and how they go to work and where they go to work, right?
Zach, that's a great point. I think we overlooked that. A lot of people can't remember the last recession that we had when I'm old enough to remember it all too well. But if you want lower taxes, if you want your kid and your grandkid to have great opportunities to stay in the state and to find, rewarding work, we have to have economic development. We have to recruit these companies. We have to help the companies that are in Georgia. Last year, 80% of all of the companies that made announcements of hiring new people were existing industries, not companies moving in. And so we have to continue to maintain about a 2.7 to 3% annual GDP growth in the state of Georgia if we want our quality of life to continue like it is now and if we want our kids to have those opportunities.
You mentioned something a little while ago when we were talking about the ports. You talked about the T word, tariffs, said the port saw a little bit of a dip as an impact of the tariffs. This tariff conversation continues at the national level, and we feel those impacts. Broadly speaking, across the Georgia economy, how have these tariffs impacted business here in Georgia?
So it's really a tale of two tariffs, if you will. If you talk to the large companies, they had the resources to stockpile goods and products before the tariffs went into effect. They had the opportunity to find alternative supply chains. But if you go talk to a lot of our small businesses, they really took it on the chin. There was nowhere to store the stuff. They couldn't get the loans to go out and buy it beforehand. And so it's really the mom and pops on Main Street that have suffered the most. And I think they're continuing to suffer today. And so we have to, we spend a lot of time helping them find new sources, looking at what the impact is. But it's an ongoing issue.
You bring up something I really wanted to talk about here too, which is those mom and pop shops, the small businesses that are in a lot of ways the backbones of communities across our state. What do you say to those small business owners who may sometimes feel like the big businesses, the big industries get a lot of the love and attention,
Sure.
and they are the ones, those small businesses, that are struggling the most sometimes?
No, I think if you go and talk to a lot of those small businesses, they want the large companies in town because they're going to do supply work for them. I talked to a landscape company the other day, and they were so happy of the 3 companies that had been recruited to their community because those 3 new customers that they have, right? That they didn't have that before. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. But those small businesses do oftentimes feel like they've been overlooked. But I think that's where our local chambers really do a great job. And that's why we want a lot of those companies to tell their story in this competition as well so we can share that with others.
And let's talk about that storytelling again to circle back as we close in on our end of time in this segment, which is a bummer because we've got a lot to talk about here. But this competition, for people who want to get into the game and
Yeah.
put their coolest thing up against everybody else's coolest thing made in Georgia. How do they do that? If people want to vote, how do they do that? Where can they go to get all this information?
They can go to gachamber.com, and they can also go to coolestthingmadeingeorgia.com. They can nominate there, and then we'll announce probably in about 3 weeks or so that voting will start. It'll be a little truncated voting this year because of the World Cup. I don't know if y'all heard about that. It's coming to Georgia. And then we'll announce the winner on August 5th in Athens at our congressional luncheon.
That was a good tease. You could do my job. You could do some TV. I'm
Sure.
not going to let you go without talking about the World Cup because you've opened that door now.
Yeah.
Before we go, what is the Chamber's expectation of the economic impact of the World Cup coming to Atlanta?
Well, listen, there's an immediate impact that could be, $500 million plus during those games. I think it's a much bigger impact, though, because it allows us, just like the Olympics did in 1996, to tell our story and to expose Georgia's business community to companies from all over the world that are going to be here in town. And so you're going to see our friends at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, lots of other partners networking and using this as a sales opportunity, just like we did in 96. So it's not a one-time event that lasts a month. We have to leverage that for the next year or two to continue to tell the story and to show well, right? We want all these other products and events and programs to come to Georgia, and if we can pull this one off, which I feel confident we can, then that's just going to bode well for the future.
Is Atlanta ready?
Atlanta's ready. Heck, we were just named the #1 sports city in the country, so let's go do it.
Something, if you live in Atlanta, you already know. And Chris Clark, President and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, thank you very much for being here. An interesting conversation, and one I'm sure we're going to continue to have. World Cup's coming, and a lot of money is going to be impacting the metro economy in the whole state.
That's right.
Chris, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.